You're listening to the Naked Bible Podcast. To support this podcast, go to nakedbiblepodcast.com and click on the support link in the upper right-hand corner. If you're new to the podcast and Dr. Heiser's approach to the Bible, click on New Start Here at nakedbiblepodcast.com.
Welcome to the Naked Bible Podcast, episode 77, Interviews for Mike's Academic Conferences, Part 1. I'm your layman, Trey Strickland. He's the scholar, Dr. Michael Heiser. Hey, Mike, how you doing this week?
Very good. This is sort of a something different. I think it'll be kind of a treat for listeners, what we're going to do in this episode and, of course, also the next one.
Yeah, I'm excited about this. We've got several interviews from your conferences you did, so I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, across the both episodes, there's going to be over 20, so we've split them up. And these are people, most of whom I know, have known, for at least a couple years, and some go all the way back to, really even 30 years, that they've known me. So I think people will just find it interesting as I talk to scholars and you find out not only why do these people come to these events, these conferences, but also some of the stuff they're into, what they specialize in, what courses they teach, that sort of thing.
Well, all right. Well, here we go.
All right. I'm here with Dr. Carl Sanders. Carl's a friend of mine for a long time. And Carl, why don't you introduce yourself, and we just want to give people an idea of what goes on at the ETS conference this whole week. And then I'll pepper you with some real hard-hitting questions.
Okay. I'm Carl Sanders. I'm a professor primarily in the area of theology at Capital Seminary and Graduate School in the Washington, D.C. area. And I'm not sure what else you need to know, but I'm married and I have 4 kids, adult kids, and like to hang out at these conferences a lot.
So what are some of the courses you teach?
I just finished a residency teaching a course on theology of culture. I teach general systematic theology courses, taught a course on New Testament theology and hermeneutics recently. So just a variety of things. Again, a lot of systematic theology topics.
Okay. And so these are mostly pastors or wannabe pastors, right?
Primarily, yes.
Okay. So, have you heard any good papers yet? I know this is the first day. Have you heard anything?
This is the first day, and no, I haven't gone to any papers yet.
Okay. Are you scoping anything out?
I have a couple selected for this afternoon I'm hoping to go to.
Do you remember what they're about?
A couple of them on theological method. So think about ways we do theology. One is talking about the Wesleyan quadrilateral and offering a fifth thing to add to that. So that looked kind of interesting. I don't know if it'd be good or bad.
What would we call that then?
The pentagon or something.
Pentagram maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if we want to say pentagram. That might conjure up some bad imagery. But
let's do the pentagram approach to theology. Yeah. Hey, are you looking for any books? Anything you're trying to check out? Want to score this year?
There are always lots of them. Although I'm staying for the SBL conference as well. So most of my books I'll buy then, so I don't have to lug them around. I have to move hotels in between. But I actually bought 2 already. One was a Festschrift on in honor of John Feinberg, a theology guy, and the other was Anthony Thistleton's Companion to Theology, which is a bunch of articles he's written on theological topics that they had a super sale on. I couldn't resist.
Yeah, I heard about that. How much were they selling it for?
$15. It's normally $75.
Oh,
so.
Wow. Yeah, well, see, that's the reason why a lot of people come, because you get these crazy deals on books. Now, why did you buy the Feinberg Festschrift?
A couple of interesting essays, and I looked at the table of contents before I bought it, but I do systematic theology, so Kevin Van Hooser has one on the development of doctrine, and so I'm always interested in that. Think about how doctrines have developed over history and why doctrines sometimes change over time. So.
Mm-hmm. Carl, I would love to talk to you about your memoirs.
Okay. Yes, I'm sure you would.
Let me just ask you. Can you repeat the title, because this will be public or not? Is that something you want to make a matter of record, or?
Why not? Okay, because I'll appropriately edit it. So I've thought writing my memoirs. I taught at a college that had some serious financial problems and ended up essentially closing, and so I thought writing about that experience, how the blank did I end up in Bible college would be the title for it, which is actually a direct quote from one of my students who was in my office one time. Again, it might be a little off-putting for some of the potential audience, but it did kind of capture the spirit of it just as a bit.
Have you thought of a subtitle to it yet?
No, I haven't, but I probably should come up with a good one.
All right, well, thanks a lot. Thanks for talking to us. I'm here with Dr. Gary Brashers. Gary, could you introduce yourself, and then I'll ask you some real hard-hitting journalistic questions.
I teach students at Western Seminary. We often talk about theology and related topics, and my home base is in Portland, Oregon, where I met Mike Heiser, one of the most troublemaking guys I've ever known in my life, who's become my friend, because we have a lot in common.
Yeah, you might recognize, if any of you have watched the trailer, this is one of the voices from that trailer, so you might recognize Gary is plugging the book. And you have an interesting story about what happened to you when you started talking about the content in your classes.
Well, I was talking about the gods, and doing that actually from the Hebrew of Exodus chapter 20, and one of my students was actually doing it, John Mark Comer, at what was in Solid Rock, and so I got tagged as a polytheist and a heretic, and if you Google my name, Gary Brashers, you'll see for years now that I am a heretic because I'm teaching the doctrines I learned from Mike Heiser.
Is that how you explained it then?
Something like that. Yeah, I'm actually teaching what's in the Bible, but I'd rather credit you for heresy than the Bible.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
there you go.
Because I'm clearly a heretic. The Discernment blog knows that.
The Discernment blog. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, all of you might want to go up, and do that Google search. And then my piece of advice would be, whatever Gary writes, you should just take the time to read, because it's probably going to be good stuff. If he gets branded that way, he must be doing something right. Have you been to any papers yet?
I was on a panel this morning and did a presentation as a part of that.
What was it on?
It was a Christian society type thing, a part of Evangelical Theological Society. And my specific question is, should we proclaim biblical sexuality into the culture? And my answer, of course, is yes. The whole thing is how.
Right.
You do it as a way of speaking hope and grace to somebody. How can I serve you? Instead of saying what a filthy sinner you are.
Yeah.
We actually honor people with whom we find in sin. It's amazing what it does when we come and say, can I serve you, and bring the hope of Jesus Christ to a broken and hurting world.
Did you get any pushback?
Yes.
Okay, well,
yes.
Can you describe some of the pushback?
The pushback is simply, if I would accept a lesbian couple into our marriage class and help them do better in their relationship, as a part of that, then I'm condoning their relationship. I should point out what sinners they are. And I'm saying we're going to be very clear in our view of biblical sexuality, but I'm going to help people who are cohabiting. I help Christians married to non-Christians, all kinds of marriages I would never condone or do, but I'm going to help them work through that. And in the process, I'm hoping a biblical picture of hopeful picture of what can happen will draw them in, and they'll see gospel transformation in their life.
Yeah, Jesus, I often think of it this way. Jesus had this really uncanny knack of being able to tell people the truth.
Yeah.
He always told them the truth, just dead on, go and sin no more, but, and then he always says something helpful. He has this knack of telling them the truth of God's word, but then they always wanted to be around it.
Amazing. Well, someone wanted to kill him, just to be sure.
Well, the ones he's targeting as far as their moral issues, the woman at the well, all that. Yeah. The Pharisees don't like him because he's basically stealing their thunder and their glory. But it's just uncanny how, the sinners accept the truth about themselves, but yet they still are attracted to it.
It's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
And I think it brings hope and healing and mercy, and I think that's what the church should be known for. And we're not abandoning our morality. Oh my gosh, no. We're getting hope that people would love to be in a traditional marriage. I look at the stories that people want to believe. They just don't have any hope they can get there, and we can bring hope. My biblical metaphor was Zacchaeus, because here's everybody say the worst sinner in the world, and Jesus, I'm coming to your house today. He honors him for crying out loud. And of course, he hears gospel and is radically radically converted. It's pretty amazing.
I mean, he gets the truth told to him too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting paradigm. Are you looking forward to any other papers? Are you just kind of scoping something out, or are you looking for any books in particular?
I heard this book about unseen reality. I mean, it sounded like a really controversial topic, and I love.
They haven't taken it off the book tables.
Yeah, the plenaries this year are just amazing. We've got Wesley Hill coming tonight, and I just admire him so much. I've never met him, but I've read him and heard him, and he's just a voice that I think needs to be heard. And the basic thing there is if you get tied in with Jesus, he's going to make it really hard for you. I don't care what you're doing. He's going to go at something you count incredibly essential to who you are and say, that's sin, let's get rid of it. I'll help. And I love that message. I don't have to be slave to my passions, but I don't have to deny my passions either. I have to get his help to change them.
Yeah, the framework for that, for those listening, is the theme of the conference this year is marriage and family. So a lot of the sessions are geared to, again, some of these issues that Gary's been talking about. Well, thanks for chatting with us for a few minutes. Thanks for your time.
Go great, more heresy.
There we go. I'm here with Jens Kofoed. And why don't you introduce yourself, tell people where you're from, what your specialty is, who you are, why you come here.
I'm an Old Testament scholar from Denmark. I have two positions, one in Oslo and one in Copenhagen, and I teach Old Testament there. I specialized and did my PhD in Israel's history, and no evangelical scholars working on Israel's history in Europe, so I really came here the first time to find scholars working in the same field. And for the last 12, 15 years, I've been coming here for the annual meetings. Meetings are simply necessary for me in terms of networking and not so much for the lectures or papers actually.
Right.
There are good lectures and good papers in between, but nowadays it's mostly for networking.
So why don't you describe for people what being in the evangelical orbit where you live is like? I mean, because we've talked about this before, sort of the academic struggle, the mountain you have to climb, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Well, in Denmark, we are 3 evangelical Old Testament scholars.
Wow.
In Norway, about 4 or 5. So we are a minority. And, that's also one of the reasons why we need to engage with evangelical scholars especially from North America, because we are so few in Scandinavia. We do have contacts in Germany where there are more evangelical scholars, but they tend to be more focused on what's going on in Germany and not very much in what's going on in the world around them. So we are under a lot of pressure, and especially in my field of specialization, the Copenhagen School, of course, has been very influential. It started in Copenhagen, obviously, and been very influential in Scandinavia. So I really depend on like-minded scholars, especially in North America.
For those that don't know, can you sketch in 1 or 2 sentences where the Copenhagen School is coming at? And often on the blog, I get people that reference, the big scholars, Lemke and Thompson and all those guys, as though what they've done is sort of the final word or even a consensus. So, there's no sense of them even being sort of extreme, even in their own area, critiquing Israel's history.
Yeah, well, it's tough to do it briefly, but I think the tendency over the last 20 or 30 years have been to deny more and more of the historicity of the Old Testament. It began in the 80s by denying the patriarchal narratives and then the United Monarchy. And I think the Copenhagen School is just the end of the road, denying almost everything as historically anchored. So they view the Old Testament as a Jewish propaganda schrift from the Hellenistic period. Thompson, for example, once wrote that it was prompted by the Maccabean revolt in the 2nd century.
Yeah.
And other adherents to the Copenhagen School has said that it was created overnight, more or less overnight, by the Jewish intelligentsia in 2nd century Israel.
What do you think motivates that kind of talk? Because that's really out on the fringe in skeptic land. I mean, there's, as you said, for decades there's been a general current of skepticism, but to say stuff like that, what do you think motivates that kind of thinking?
There are a number of factors, I think. I do think one of them is spiritual, but I don't talk often about that because it's very difficult to guess about people's spiritual motivations.
How are you going to know what's really going on?
Yeah, exactly.
There, yeah.
But Thompson is an acclaimed agnostic and has been very militant against a biblically anchored view on Israel, etc. So there's something going on there, spiritually and politically. But I think the most influential factor is a positivistic view on a positivistic worldview, meaning that anything that cannot be measured and weighed.
Get out our calipers and our microscopes.
Exactly. So as long as we do not have empirical evidence from, say, the United Monarchy, 10th century BC, it's not there. And we cannot believe that it existed.
What about ancient Near Eastern material? I mean, let's just say, let's be a little bit charitable here, post-1000 BC. I mean, in other words, long before the Hellenistic period, where you've got connections like to the Amorite dynasty. I mean, how can you posit this Hellenistic, it must have just happened overnight, kind of thinking, when you do have certain correlations?
Yeah. And that's, of course, the problem they face. And I don't think they've argued convincingly for their case. But what they've done is actually to go back to Wellhausen's dictum that the texts reflect the time of their latest redactor or author. Okay. And what they do is to say, the latest extant texts are from 2nd century BC, the Qumran texts. And since they were copied in Qumran...
The older ones would have looked like the phone book, but these look like the Hebrew Bible.
Yeah. And since they were copied in Qumran, they were copied for a reason. And that's the most important question we need to ask the text. If we are going to use the texts for a reconstruction of Israel's earlier history, in their eyes, we will have to argue convincingly that there is a continuity somehow between these very late extant texts
and what they were supposed to be copied.
Exactly. And since there is comparatively meager evidence from the 10th, 11th, 10th, 9th century, they are simply not convinced that it was there.
Oh, it's interesting.
The earliest Israel they will speak of is Omri's Israel. That's the northern kingdom. Whereas the earliest Judean kingdom they will speak of is the 8th century kings in Judah. Before that, we have no evidence in their eyes.
Right. Yeah, that's going to be what you're left with if you exclude the texts.
Exactly.
So it's just to me it just. I mean, again, this is Mike talking now. This is not Jens talking. But I often when I run into this kind of thing, I think, is there a latent sort of anti-Semitism going on here? Because it just seems like Israel is singled out as being the lone culture that was too inept to produce written material that was fairly contemporaneous. Whereas you have all these other ancient Near Eastern and Eastern Mediterranean cultures doing this. How did Israel just miss the boat? And you get guys like Millard who talk about literacy, in these periods and pretty early, based on the epigraphs. I mean, when you have epigraphs that are letters, which shows that, this is just generic correspondence, that to not think, oh, well, that probably indicates they were writing other things or were capable of more, instead of we just have these little notes passed. It just seems like Israel is singled out as being backward.
Yeah, and I don't think they're being good archaeologists as well, because even if we exclude the textual, that's the biblical evidence, we have enough archaeological evidence at least to allow for development, political development, demographic development in Syro-Palestine. Like the one that's described in the biblical text.
Yeah, like an urban culture.
Exactly.
Where you need, hierarchy, you need planned labor, you need...
Yeah, and you have, in the 10th century, you have things going on both in the south, in the Negev highlands, they're being fortified. A lot of small fortified settlements pop up there. They only exist for a very short period. We have similar things going on in the Shfala and in the Sharon Plain. So they need to explain that and come up with a better explanation.
Somebody's creating and supervising, creating the organization and supervising the labor to produce those things.
Exactly. The best explanation is that there is a centralization of power in the Judean highlands.
Yeah, nobody's going to just go on vacation and build a fortification around their town.
No.
Yeah, they've got to be ordered to do that and then stick with the job.
Yeah, that's true.
So, well, thanks for spending a few minutes with us. I think listeners will find it interesting.
Welcome.
I'm here with Steve Burns. We're at the Evangelical Theological Society conference. And Steve is with the Goodwill Rights Management Corporation, and we have met before, but I want to let him introduce himself and what he does, and maybe a little bit of our connection and his own ministry.
Yeah, so for me, I'm actually working with Goodwill Rights. They're helping us with distribution on our books. I'm actually part of 1517, the Legacy Project. And what we do, we're trying to reintroduce the ideas and influence of the Lutheran Reformation to the general Christian audience. Generally, Lutherans are not super good at this. We usually come in and say, we're right, submit, and that doesn't really work with conversations. So we want to put our stuff out there into the marketplace and have people interact with it, and not necessarily become Lutherans, but see what we bring to the table, what has value. One of the things, I got introduced through some friends to your book pre-publication, which it wasn't the Unseen Realm at that time.
The myth that is true.
The myth that is true, and we were all kind of blown away, and I wasn't as blown away because I had a guy named Dr. Meredith Klein when I was in seminary. And there were a lot of connecting points because he's an ancient Near Eastern guy, but you've brought together some really great stuff, and you've come to some conclusions about it, and I tend to share those conclusions now. Initially, I was a little resistant, but you converted me, and so that was the introduction. But part of what our organization is doing, or what we're hoping to do, is do something together with other Christians to ignite a new Reformation. I mean, that's what we need. And where's the heart of the Reformation? What is it? It was going back to the sources. It was that. Yeah, it was that Renaissance idea. They started doing the stuff with the original languages. Well, what have we got now? We've got something way better than Erasmus Enchiridion. We've got logos. We've got all of these different products,
and access to primary sources in the ancient Near East, and just tons of things that they didn't have. That's really an interesting analogy, and I'll confess I haven't I haven't thought about what I do and the content as a new reformation, but now that you've stuck that in my head, that's going to stick with me for a while, because it's true. What I'm really asking people to do is, approach the Bible the way the biblical writer would have done it. Go back to primary sources, get their worldview in your head, and just take off. Reread your Bible again.
Yeah, and it opens doors. It I won't say that it revitalizes the text, but it opens your eyes to how vibrant the text is. Yeah. And we, unfortunately, I had a Greek professor who said that for him, reading an English translation by itself was like drinking beer through a straw, because you miss out on some of the nuances. And he would use translations when he was talking to us about a passage, but generally he was just doing it straight from the text, and I so admired that. And so and that's something that what you're involved with Logos and what you're doing now with Naked Bible and all these different things. I find that stuff fascinating. And forget about like agreeing with every point. That's not the point.
Right. It's not the point.
Talk to rabbis about agreeing. I think that there was some story about.
There might have been too.
Yeah, God. No, it's like God might win an argument if he were in a debate with a bunch of rabbis. So it's just it's about interacting with the text, because we think that the text is alive, right?
Yeah.
That it's sharper than a double-edged sword, able to divide, joints and marrow, spirit. You've got this very powerful thing that we're dealing with, and when we interact with it, as close as we can get to what it is, in its context, in the original languages, stuff happens.
Yeah.
and that's fun. I think that's exciting. It's fun.
Well, I'm glad we ran into each other, because as you told me last year, that Steve was the guy that came up to me last year and said in hushed tones, there's a group of Lutherans out there that really like your stuff.
Yeah.
It was a big secret.
Yeah.
But a lot of people wouldn't. When I get into discussions, people, who aren't familiar with either me or the content, they automatically, their mind just goes to, the charismatics, or something like that.
No.
And so I think, having you as part of this is good exposure to, no. This is a whole lot bigger.
Well, you're doing, you're exposing the average guy, the trucker, the printer or whatever, to what's going on in the scholarly world, which I think is the job of a scholar. And oftentimes, I listen to conversations even around here, and we can fall into this. I mean, I could fall into this, where it just becomes this rote thing, where we just recite. We have lines that we say in order to interact with other people like us. And aside from confirmation bias and everything else, we're not interacting. We need to cross-pollinate. Who was a big fan of that? Steve Jobs was a big fan of that. And, are you familiar at all with the Stanford School of Design?
No.
They did. They were the guys who designed the first Apple mouse and all of those things. But they talk about creative confidence, and part of their model, it's not that some guy is a genius. It's that together, when we interact, when we come at it from totally like an economist, a philosopher, a theologian, a business person, a designer, come together, we can come up with all kinds of crazy stuff, different ways to approach things, and that's really helpful. And so when we have scholars come in and tell us, this is the scholarly, this is the context, this is the discussion as it's happening right now, real time, among people who know this material. If you're able to do that, man, you're a complete ambassador for that whole discipline, and that's very, very helpful.
Yeah, that's well said too. So, do you have a chance to go to any papers?
I would love to. I'm going to try to. I haven't even had a chance to look at the catalog to see who's speaking. To be honest,
I looked at it on the plane. We're only on the first day, so.
Are you speaking?
I'm doing a paper on Thursday.
Okay.
That is really going to be about a tools-based approach to language learning. It's
I
really,
want that.
It's going to be kind of an infomercial for our Learn to Use Greek and Hebrew 2.0.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm
probably going to be enrolled in that. So just so you know, I'm probably a little bit advanced, but I want to get into those tools and be able to help other people to do that.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see what the response in the room is, because what do we mean when we talk about things like a successful approach to language learning. Like, what does that mean? Does that mean you can sight read? Does that mean you only have to use a lexicon a few times?
Right.
But like, what? Even if you can say that at the end of your seminary career, you get out in the ministry. Nobody I know, nobody I've ever even heard of, is spending 10 hours a week, an hour a day on Greek and Hebrew, reviewing vocab and forms and practicing translation.
Not at all.
Nobody does that.
No.
So it's just, to me, it's a pie in the sky kind of approach to language learning, and we're trying to target people who don't even know the alphabet.
Right.
And front-loading the payoff, talking about exegesis, concepts, terminology, mastering that, and then mastering tools, so that you can interact with a scholarly commentary or a journal article.
Right. And see if you can get the average guy who, and when I say average, I'm not talking about intelligence. I'm talking about what their interest is, what their vocation is. Lutherans talk a lot about vocation. So, people are cut out for certain things. God works through means, and He uses the baker to feed us, and He uses the scholar to teach us things. But if you can get a guy who's a trucker to actually study this stuff, you're going to get something out of him you would never get out of you or me. I mean, that's the amazing part.
It's funny because I have a friend from Nashville who came up to see me here at the conference who is a trucker.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
It's too bad he's not here listening to us, because he'd probably high-five you.
Yeah,
But no, he has a real sustained interest in biblical theology.
No, that's great.
He's very bright. He just got absorbed by the content.
Yeah, that's what it takes. I mean, I've had some of the best insights from people who are not scholars at all, but they call me on stuff. When I think I've got it all wrapped up, and they say, well, there's a little bit different way you could look at this, and I'm floored oftentimes.
Yeah.
So it's worth it to not be so neck down, and a place like this oftentimes is. There's a lot to learn here. There's a lot of information, tons of books, more than you could possibly absorb.
Yeah.
But I think that reaching out to people and giving them the raw, unfiltered text is just the best thing. It's just wonderful.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that. I mean, listeners will know that it's kind of paradoxical, because the very thing that just turns people on and really is a gateway to them rediscovering Scripture is the thing that scares somebody else, because it's unfiltered. But,
right, and
that's just the way it is.
Yeah, and of course, when we talk about, we've been having this conversation kind of in-house, when we talk about, what orthodoxy is, you want that, is it a barbed wire fence, or is it more of a lighthouse? Mm-hmm. And we tend to think it's more of a lighthouse. It's something that keeps us anchored. Throughout history, the church has had certain ideas that are really seminal to what we are as Christians. Mm-hmm. And we need to know what those things are. But is it just this barricade that keeps us safe? And I don't think God is safe. I mean, so I don't think His book indicates that He's safe.
Yeah, like Steve is a podcast listener, and the whole thing about God not being safe takes my mind back to the burnt offering in Leviticus. So even if you don't have an issue here, you bring God a gift, you bring God a present.
Those brothers made a mistake. Yeah. So that's definitely where I'm at with it. I just think you're doing a fantastic job. I'm enjoying it. I'm glad, I'm glad you're not a Lutheran. I mean, because you're doing something very different than what we would do. And that's the whole point, We've got to talk to each other. So,
well, thanks for spending a few minutes with us.
Sure, absolutely.
Well, I'm here with a special person here at the conference, Dave Burggraaf. And what makes Dave special was Dave was my original pastor. When I became a Christian when I was 16 in Lebanon, Pennsylvania, this guy was my first pastor. And believe it or not, we're still friends. Yeah. So Dave, just tell us where you're at, what you're doing, what your ministry is now.
Well, the last few years I've done two roles. One is I serve on a seminary faculty, teaching theology at Shepherd Seminary in North Carolina. And I also serve on a church staff, a large mega church staff, but where the seminary is hosted. It's Colonial Baptist Church in Cary, North Carolina. And so involved in that ministry, which gives, for me, the wonderful opportunity of pastoring while at the same time having the teaching outlet impacting lives.
We've always sort of done both.
Mm-hmm.
You were a pastor for many years. You've been a senior pastor. You've been a professor. You've been a seminary president. All these different roles. So what keeps you coming back to the conference? Why do you come to ETS?
One, to network with friends.
Friends is always at the top of the list.
Friends at the top of the list. Give Mike a hug every year. See what's happening in your life. But also come because I was challenged years ago by John Hanna. He has some wonderful lines, if you remember, from down at Dallas Seminary. And he said, and if you don't contribute to the academy, you become parasitic of it. And if whether it's presenting a paper or just coming and being stimulated, it's sort of the professor's way of going back to school each year. Well, if nothing else, what it does is it stirs you to realize that you're falling behind. You know what I mean? You're constantly having to be challenged. It really is an iron sharpening iron event.
So, have you been to any papers yet?
3 this morning already. The first one was...
Any good?
Yeah, the first one was good, but the second 2 were better. Okay. It was pastoral theology and counseling, actually, because the second one was Craig Blomberg, and he's always stimulating. And he had some wonderful things to say about what we're seeing in the New Testament relative to, because the theme this year is faith in marriage and the home, and so on. He had some great things to talk about, some discontinuities that he sees going on. The other one was Cindy Westfall had done a great paper on the household codes, and hers was, both of them were just on the edge of being edgy, but also provocative, good thinking, and well-grounded in the text.
Okay. What was the first one?
John Trent, and this is his first time ever at ETS.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, John.
I saw him in the program.
Right, and he's doing a keynote here towards the end. But what was interesting is he's a psychologist, and that's his degree field. And although he's at Dallas THM, he went on and did his PhD, and he said this is his first time ever to be at ETS and present, and it showed. So, and I'm being gracious.
Okay.
So. Say no more. It was good.
We don't need to elaborate.
No. It was interesting.
Okay,
So.
well, that's good. Are there any you're looking forward to going to hear?
Yeah, there's this. Well, I have to fly out to see my parents, so I can't listen to yours. So I'm going to Minnesota. It's either Mike or Minnesota, and the ticket's already bought.
Mom and Dad,
yeah, we'll do that, and meet my wife there, Mike. But there's several papers this afternoon. There's a couple. Jeff Bingham, one of my colleagues when I was at seminary, is doing some dispensationalism again and some of the controversies. There's a couple of others this afternoon. So.
All right, before I let you go, my audience would criticize me if I don't ask you this. Can you come up with either a good, bad, or awkward memory of me as a teenager in New Jersey?
Okay, no, this is good because Mike, if you remember, we had the pastoral intern program. Yeah. And we used to call it what? Preacher boys. And there was a year when we built the brand new building, if you remember, the new building, but we did not have the money, the wherewithal to hire a tractor. So do you remember? We had
picking up rocks,
and then we had to drag we had to pull a drag.
It was real high tech.
Yeah. Put 3 preacher boys pulling the plow, through the yard. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I learned a lot through that.
Yeah. And picking up fuzzies on the floor and getting fined.
Yeah.
No, but I remember one of the thoughts that just hit me when you were saying a moment ago in your book presentation, you're not a preacher, but that wasn't the case when you were a college student, and even in those programs way back then, you were an outstanding preacher, getting things out of the text that you were mining the text and seeing things few people did. So it was wonderful.
Well, that's what we try to do. We just try to, affirm what's there, get a firm grasp on the obvious. And sometimes we get in trouble for that, but what can we say? Well, thanks for spending a couple
minutes. My pleasure, always. My pleasure.
All right, well, we're here at ETS. The next person we want to talk to is Todd Rayburn. I've known Todd for a number of years. Going all all the way back to some of the Roswell conferences. So Todd is not a biblical scholar by training, but a strong interest in biblical stuff. So Todd, I'm going to let you explain why you're here and your impressions so far.
I'm here, as Mike said, because of my interests. My connection to Mike is I authored a book, and don't get any ideas from this, but back then Mike had time.
What year was that?
Actually he didn't. He took the time back then to do a scholarly edit of my book text, which I'm forever grateful for. And I've had correspondence with Mike ever since, and saw Mike in Nashville a year ago maybe.
Yeah.
And Mike invited me here, and I didn't even know about the conference, and this thing is really amazing, and I'm really excited to be here, and so many topics and subjects that I'm interested in here, so just tagging along behind Mike like a pet dog.
Something like that. I mean, I've said that to a lot of people. It's like, look, when the conferences are in your area, a few hours, drive, just, I don't know, what registration costs you. It couldn't have been much, $30, $40.
Yeah, it's like $40 if you do it in advance far enough. It's about $100 when you get here.
Yeah, you do it in advance, you get here, you go to any session you want. Go to the book tables, and those are always a big deal because it's the steepest discount of the year for basically anybody that's here. And some of the high-end scholarly publishers that show up at SPL, it's the only time of year they give you any discount. So it's worth $40, just to come in.
It's worth $100 to me.
Yeah, well, you can meet people too. We were just talking about some people we hope we run into. Craig Evans, Darrell Bock, John Walton. I haven't seen Craig or John yet. I've run into Darrell though, but they're all here, and you just go and hear them do a paper and chat with them afterwards.
I got to speak 15 minutes with Dr. Hugh Ross. He's one of my favorite guys.
Yeah, he has a booth here right across from ours. Yeah,
enjoyed it very much. He was, to me, he's sort of a rock star, but he was just sitting there in a booth, and I was able to approach him and talk.
Really, that's why people should come. They can hear, stuff that's interesting, but they can get a book, get it signed, chit chat with whoever it is, and ask them a question. I've always wanted to ask Dr. So-and-so this question, so this is the place to do it. So you drove from Nashville.
Drove from Memphis.
Memphis, okay.
Yep. Actually, I live between Memphis and Nashville, but a little closer to Memphis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, how long are you going to be here? You're going to make a...
The plan was to leave Thursday night, but those plans are... Those plans are getting shot by SBL.
Yeah, that's a bit of a trip there.
Yeah.
To do that. So
I'm working on a new plan.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you came. Like I said, we all go all the way back to some of the old Roswell conferences.
Yep.
So it's good to see you. And I thought it would be fun for you. So glad you showed up.
Well, you were right.
Thanks a lot.
Yes, sir.
Back to ETS, I'm here with Darrell Bock. Darrell, just introduce yourself real briefly to everybody.
I am Senior Research Professor at Dallas Theological Seminary and Executive Director for Cultural Engagement at the Hendrick Center at the Seminary and Senior Bible Teacher for Back to the Bible Radio. So which one do you want?
You could do that all in one breath.
It's a big breath, all right? Another 10 years probably won't be possible.
So have you heard any good papers yet?
Well, I haven't. The only paper I've been to was a panel that I was on. So
what was that about?
It was on religious liberty and the shifting in our culture and how Christians should be dealing with that. So I had a section of that, and I was there with about 5 other people.
Was that the one Gary Brashers was on?
Yes, yes, same one.
Did you disagree with Gary?
No, Gary and I actually worked together, a theologian and exegete agreeing. It was an amazing moment.
Was it captured on video?
Well, if it is, it should be archived or something because, it happens so rarely.
Are you angling for any other paper topics you got on your
I've
list?
got two more. I've got one on the future of Israel and the land, and what Scripture has to say about that. And then I'm responding to Mike Lacona's comparison of how historiography in the Gospels works, Plutarch vis-a-vis the Synoptic Gospels.
Do you have any idea, this is getting a little off the ETS track, but I noticed in SBL, Larry Hurtado is responding in a session about sort of like, what is Israel? Do you have any idea what he's going to say?
I have no idea what he's going to say.
Okay.
Okay.
I thought you might give me a
Yeah,
heads
but
up there.
if he has Border Strawn, that will be helpful.
Okay. Okay. Have you bought anything? Scored any good books?
Not books yet. I did all my update on accordance and some of that stuff.
Okay.
So I work all the computer angles while I'm here. So yeah, I've already typed for you guys. I mean, what else?
You know how to work the system.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Well, make sure they treat you right.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for giving us a few minutes.
Hey, glad to do it as always.
Well, we're here with Mike Grisanti. Can you just introduce yourself to the audience a little bit, Mike? Who are you? What you do?
Yeah, I'm Mike Grisanti, Old Testament prof at the Master's Seminary in Southern California. I teach Hebrew courses, OTI, History of Israel related courses. Love what I do.
Are they all MDiv, or do you guys have an advanced?
No, we have MDiv. I'm half MDiv, half THM, and then we have a PhD program that's small, mentoring focus. They have a DMin program, but I don't teach much in that.
Okay.
So it's mainly MDiv, THM,
All right.
teeny bit PhD.
You and I have a long history. We've known each other for a long time.
What a blessing.
Yeah, I would agree as well, naturally. While you're here, have you gone to any papers?
Yes.
Okay. Any good ones?
Yes. Yeah. I
Always
have.
a little guarded about
I understand that. Sometimes it's like, why did I go to that paper?
Right. So give me an example of one you thought was worth the time.
Well, I've done a number of them in the area of the prophets primarily, but Danny Hayes did a great paper. He's working on a book on the theology of the Old Testament, the Bible.
Okay.
And but he just did a great paper on tracking the divine presence as a theme through the prophets.
Okay.
And it was outstanding.
Wow.
Just bringing it together.
Did he do presence and absence, or just presence?
He did presence and absence.
Okay.
And we talked about absence, what that signified as well. So I thought he did a tremendous job. I mean, it was just really amazing.
And is he so he's under contract to produce that thing?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, well, we'll have to track on that and make sure we get it when it comes out. Anything that you're looking forward to seeing?
Well, yeah, there are some in my session that I moderate in History of Israel in the invited paper session, stuff on Genesis and kind of the dicey aspects of family dynamics.
Okay.
So we have 4 papers that kind of scratch some itches that are kind of uncomfortable. Those were really interesting. So I moderate. I get to see the activity, but I'm looking forward to that, just to hear those papers. And then there's some more in the prophets. I'm working on something in the prophets, so I just am excited about some of the papers that are out there. I'm having to miss a ton. Some years it seems kind of sparse in my area of interest, but no, it seems like there's the guys who are doing them or the people doing them, and the topics are pretty interesting for me. So I have a full slate. I'm going to have to tear away to get to the book area a little bit. But
well, you're carrying something. What did you score here?
No, it's papers. And I have one book by Gene Merrill on Chronicles. It was the special price for Craigle. So it's papers, my iPad.
Is it a reprint or something?
No,
new?
it's a new one. It's their exegetical commentary.
Okay.
So it's a special price today.
Oh, how much?
It's instead of, I have to remember, it's right around the corner. It was like 60% off.
Okay.
So
wow.
yeah, they do a book a day. Something else is a cheaper price.
Okay.
So I don't come down here. I do more in SBL in the book area. It slows down for me. So I do try to get those.
Yeah.
And I'll be coming with a Logos booth.
Good,
See you guys.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing a few minutes with us.
I'm glad to. Lord bless you.
I'm here with Ron Johnson. He's not going to be unfamiliar to podcast listeners. Ron and I are here at the Evangelical Theological Society conference. So, Ron, why don't you, for people who don't know you, there might be a few that listen to this that didn't hear the prior episode, just give us a brief self-introduction.
We go way back to college days. Played baseball together, did a lot of talking on the side, and went off to seminary together, I believe, same time. Probably in each other's weddings, or at least attended them, and around each other for a long time. We both taught on the same Bible college campus for a while. From there, we took different paths, but we've always stayed close friends. And my dissertation phase was where I reconnected with you, and when you introduced an idea to me, it got me thinking, and it turned out to be an entire dissertation. So that's where our paths crossed for the not for the last time, but certainly for the most important time.
What was your dissertation topic?
Well, it was a fun story there, because I wanted to do I wanted to connect the gods of the Old Testament to Paul's principalities and powers. So the title of my dissertation that got approved was The Identity of Paul's Principalities and Powers. And I ended up writing, of course, 3 to 4 chapters, long chapters, over 100 pages on the Old Testament. And I got a note one day that my dissertation had been disapproved because one of the readers had dropped it on the other reader's table or desk in his office and said, "This isn't about Paul's principalities and powers, this is about the Old Testament." And so he called me and said, you're going to have to rewrite this or do something else. And my wife was listening over the phone, had her face pressed up to it, and she wrote on a 3x5 card. She remembers this moment very well. We're at the kitchen table. She writes on a 3x5 card, "Tell him you'll change the title." And I said, "How about I change the title to the Old Testament background to Paul's principalities and powers?" And he says, "Oh, okay." And that's how it got through. So, because that's what I was doing, I was connecting the Old Testament to the New. And they weren't prepared during the initial phase to hear that much evidence coming out of the Old Testament. But they approved it. Everything went fine as long as I changed the title. So,
boy, that's interesting. So, why do you come to ETS? What's the draw? Why do all these people come? Why do you come?
To see professional classmates and what's the word? I've taught with these guys, been around them. We spend more time talking probably than going into sessions. The book room sessions, of course, that interest me and my curiosities, but mainly it's conversations with people.
Did you hear any good papers today?
I did. I heard. This is a fun issue too. Coming out of Galatians 3, I've been wondering about the curse of the law and how, of course, in the Old Testament, Jews thought of the Gentile nations because of their worship of other gods as being cursed, and they had rejected. The tradition is that God offered at Sinai, or before Sinai, he offered his law to the other nations, and they all rejected it. And so God turned to Israel, and Israel was there standing alone and said, "Okay, we'll take it," and God gave it to them. And so therefore the Gentile nations, and now I'm just paraphrasing Jewish thought, but the Gentile nations by definition, as Leviticus says, their evil is within them. They are cursed. And so that idea of being cursed, which of course doesn't actually say it in the Old Testament, but the idea is there. I'm wondering, I was sitting there in a paper today on the curse of Galatians 3:10, and the curse of the law. And I listened to the whole paper. It was very good. He did a lot of exegetical work, and he gave options as to what the curse is, and Luther to Calvin to whatever. But no option was said that I was thinking about, and so I raised my hand at the end and I said, "I really don't mean to act like I know the answer to this, but I'm honestly curious. Has anyone thought of the curse of the law being a Gentile?" Because it was written to Gentiles, of course, in Galatians. That the curse of the law is that a Gentile can't come to Yahweh, has to proselytize before he can ever have the Jewish Messiah. And he said, "No, I don't think that's a good option," based upon, and he quoted a phrase out of Galatians 3:10. But I didn't want to pursue it. Obviously that's not the time to do it. But that was a good paper because it made me think through, very specific issue that I've been thinking about. And that's what I find at ETS. It's just the providence of God in, walking into a paper that you have no idea what you're going to hear, or running into someone you haven't seen in a while. And that's happened every year. And that's what my wife prayed for me as I came, that there would be something that would happen that she would know and I would know that I was supposed to be here. So.
Well, you read a paper today. I went to hear the paper. Can you just describe what the point of that was? The
title was Improving N.T. Wright's Grand Story. Is Genesis 3 the problem, or Genesis 4 through 11? And the main theme was that I like N.T. Wright for what he's been doing and saying, and where N.T. Wright agrees, though, with traditional evangelicalism is that gods of the Old Testament are fictitious. And his reasoning is coming from the New Testament that since Thor and Hercules are, so would be all the Elohim of the Old Testament. He doesn't get into it deeply, but that's his statement, so I can tell that's where he is. But my argument was, if you start with N.T. Wright, which is hard enough for some people, but if you start with him, can he be improved? And I think he can be that way. It doesn't change his views that much. It makes them richer, more meaningful. And so it was just an explanation of how the worldview that I'm thinking of would compare to traditional evangelicalism and N.T. Wright. And it was fun, helpful for me.
Yeah, I'm hoping to talk to David Burnett later in the week, but he's another one that thinks if Wright would just add this, again, for lack of a better term, divine counsel worldview to his thinking, it would put this other layer over the top of a lot of what he's saying and bring things into sharper focus. And
right.
Yeah, sure, tweak some things here and there.
Right.
But it would make a lot of sense for other reasons of some of the things he's saying.
Right, and I like Wright for his conversational, and I say that word because it feels like you're having a conversation with the Bible when you read him. He's extremely, almost voraciously, is that a right word? Voraciously interested in the text, and I appreciate that. And here's part of the text that I think he could develop and drop into his view, and it would work just perfectly. So that's what I think, anyway.
Anything you're looking forward to hearing? Anything you got on your list of papers to go?
I'd have to look, but I don't recall anything jumping off the page. No, I'm interested in just kind of moving around and
there's
seeing
a paper
people.
on Og and the Rephaim tomorrow. And
I didn't see that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's one tomorrow, something about the deity Ra-Pi-U in Ugaritic text.
That's it.
That's related to Og.
Okay.
And then there's something else I have on my own list. Something about understanding the polemic of Deuteronomy 32, 8, and 9.
Oh, I saw that, yeah.
So I'm going to have to go hear that just to see if somebody brings me up and agrees or disagrees with me. So that has my curiosity peaked.
Yeah. I'll spend some time in the book room, of course, and just hang around. This is a time just to get away from work, too, usually every year. My wife usually comes with me, but this year Atlanta didn't interest her that much. So next year, San Antonio, much more interesting. So.
Well, thanks for taking a few minutes and talking to the podcast audience.
Sounds good. Thank you.
I'm here with Dr. L. Michael Morales at ETS, and I'd like Dr. Morales to introduce himself to all of you.
Hi, good to be with you all. Yes, my name is Michael, and I'm now teaching Old Testament and Biblical Theology at Greenville Presbyterian Theological Seminary.
So why do you come to ETS? What do you get out of it? What do you look forward to?
A lot of it is just to feed the think tank, to sort of get pricked by new ideas and listen to papers and sort of get a thumb on current scholarship and various projects I'm working on.
Have you heard any good papers?
Yes, unfortunately I can't think of the gentleman's name, but there's been a good one on in Hebrews, and Christ's ascent to the heavenly Holy of Holies was really intriguing.
Was that the one about holy war language, or?
No, that's one I wanted to get to, and I didn't actually.
Okay, yeah, neither did
I.
There.
But today there's a good one that I'm looking forward to from 1 to 4, a session on atonement in Hebrews.
Okay.
That's really good.
Well, that's good. Now, for those fans of the Naked Bible podcast, Dr. Morales is becoming the go-to guy on the theology of Leviticus and other associated texts with ritual. So he has a book coming out, and Dr. Morales, if you could tell us a little bit about that and sort of give your own book a plug here. Why should we get it?
Well, thanks. And before that, I should say, even though this seems like it's staged, that I ran into Dr. Heiser holding The Unseen Realm, and I just started and really love it so far. Yes, my book on Leviticus with IVP is called Who Shall Ascend? The Mountain of the Lord. And that title really goes to the heart of Leviticus, the high priest's ascent into the Holy of Holies. But I've tried to make it more of a biblical theological approach. So there's a chapter on Genesis and Exodus showing how the theology flows into Leviticus, and then actually take it from Leviticus through the Old Testament and have a big chapter on the New Testament and how the authors specifically of the Gospels are showing how Christ's ascent after his death and burial is fulfilling the high priest role.
Can you say a little bit about sacred space? I mean, the role of sacred space in your book, or maybe something else you've written?
I mean, that's a wide topic, but the general narrow focus that I use, at least in this forthcoming book, is specifically how the tabernacle is a portable mountain of God, and how ascent to the summit corresponds to the tabernacle as a microcosmos, so that Christ's ascent into the heavenlies would be the perfect counterpart to the high priest's ascent into the Holy of Holies. And I mean, it'd probably be far afield to explain my chapter in the New Testament, but that's where it's significant to theology, is the importance of Christ's ascent and how through the Holy Spirit we're united to his heavenly presence.
Well, that sounds like, and my listeners will be familiar with this phrase, but that sounds like some good cosmic mountain, divine counsel, chunky goodness.
Yeah, we need to form like a Trekkie club, because not everybody understands that lingo, but yeah, I love it.
Yeah, well, my listeners will, because lots of people traffic the blog and now the podcast, so I try to take them into the content of things like an unseen realm and cosmic mountain, divine abode, sacred space, all that stuff just maps so well over into the New Testament. It's nice to have somebody who's paying attention to that in Leviticus, because it's an important book.
That's right.
And it's very neglected. So thanks for spending a few minutes with us.
Thank you.
I'm here with Dr. Ed Glenny, and Ed is a special guest to run into. Ed was one of my original first-year Bible college professors. So I have been living off the capital of what Ed taught me as a freshman. So Ed, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit?
My name is Ed Glenny. I live in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I teach at the University of Northwestern in St. Paul. It used to be Northwestern College, and I've been there this is my 17th year, 39 years of teaching. The first 7 was at Pillsbury College. Yeah, the first 7 were at Pillsbury College, where I had Mike probably in about one class or something there, maybe a couple.
We had a couple survey classes, an ethics class.
So it goes back a while. I work primarily now in the area of the Septuagint. I've been writing commentaries in Brill's Septuagint commentary series. Got 3 of those volumes out, and got into Septuagint in a PhD at the University of Minnesota, where I did a PhD in classics, and they let me write on the translation technique of Amos. So that kind of got me into the Septuagint studies, and teach Bible courses at Northwestern, and try to spend my time writing as much as I can.
So what are you doing here? I mean, have you heard any good papers? Are you giving any sessions?
Yeah, I did a couple papers. We just started a new group at ETS called Septuagint Studies. First time in, I think, 69 years of ETS that we've had something like that. So really good enthusiasm in the group yesterday, and we're excited about moving ahead with that. And then I'm the chair of the hermeneutic study group, and we had a really good discussion yesterday on the fulfillment of Old Testament promises to Israel with different viewpoints, and it was just a tremendous discussion, packed house, and so that was fun too.
Good. So are you looking forward to anything? You got anything else to do?
Well, I just have one more response to do at the Institute for Biblical Research in a study group over there on, I think it's tomorrow afternoon. So otherwise, I'm just enjoying myself now, the book shopping here is amazing, the people you run into, so I'm just enjoying my time and trying to catch up on books that I need.
Yeah. Well, thanks for spending a few minutes with us.
You're welcome. Thanks, Mike.
I'm here with Tremper Longman. Tremper, could you introduce yourself to the listeners?
Yeah, I'm Tremper Longman. I'm a professor of Old Testament studies at Westmont College in Santa Barbara, California.
And you come to the meetings because?
Well, I come to the meetings and have for the past 30 plus years every year, because this is where everybody meets, networks with each other. We meet with publishers. I edit a bunch of series, so we have meetings concerning that. I'm the president of the Institute of Biblical Research, which holds its annual meetings this year, and the occasional paper. Actually, I don't go to many papers.
Right.
And I give the occasional paper, like I'm giving one this afternoon.
So what's your paper on this afternoon?
My paper this afternoon is on the Song of Songs. The theme of this conference is marriage and family. I do co-run a wisdom literature section with Richard Schultz of Wheaton College and Brian Galt, and they asked me to give a paper based on my research on the Song of Songs.
Are you going to shock anybody?
Yeah. It's actually based.
Are we going to blush?
It's actually based on my book with Dan Allender, the psychologist, called God Loves Sex. So just the title of that book makes people blush.
Right. And anything with Song of Songs will probably get the room filled anyway.
Yeah, we'll see.
So are you looking for anything on the book tables in particular? Are you researching anything currently? Or?
Yeah, I'm actually got a number of projects. I'm happy to see the page proofs of my forthcoming Genesis commentary on Zondervan's table, and I'm finishing a book on wisdom in the Bible, kind of a general synthetic work on wisdom per Baker that should be done by January. So I'm keeping my eyes open for books on wisdom.
Yeah, there you go.
And so, plus some other future projects. So, yeah, it's an important place to come and see what the new books are.
All right, one last question. Did you notice in the SBL program that they're having a session with Michael Fox, sort of like looking back on his Song of Songs material? I guess reevaluating or evaluating. Have you seen that?
I haven't, because I have to go look at it, because I know Michael and I appreciate his work, and anything he says is interesting, stimulating.
Yeah, it's going back to his work on Egyptian love poetry.
Yeah, right.
So.
No, I'm very familiar with it. Yeah. Because when I wrote my commentary on the Song of Songs, I consulted that and other work.
Well, there you go. Maybe you'll get to that one.
Yeah. Thanks for telling me about it.
Yeah, you bet. Well, thanks for spending a few minutes with us.
Oh, sure. My pleasure.
All right, Mike. Well, those interviews were great. I'm excited about next week. We'll finish up with the interviews on part 2.
Yeah, there's just a lot of interesting people that you run into at the academic conferences. Again, for those people who don't have their head, in this kind of world, I think some of what people are into, what they teach, what they do research on, is just real interesting. And even though, again, in a lot of cases, you never quite, get access to it. That's why I write books like The Unseen Realm. That's why we do the podcast, these sorts of things. But it's just a great time to connect, again, with people and sort of get a little heads up as to what they're thinking about, what their next project is, might be working on an article or something like that. So these were interesting. And I think the next week, the next episode, people will, get more of the same. It's kind of surprising what people are into and how they sort of look at what they do as scholars.
Yeah, it feels like I get a peek behind the curtain at the Wizard.
Yep.
All right, Mike. Well, we appreciate it. And just want to thank everybody for listening to the Naked Bible Podcast. God bless.
Thanks for listening to the Naked Bible Podcast. To support this podcast, visit www.nakedbibleblog.com. To learn more about Dr. Heiser's other websites and blogs, go to www.drmsh.com.